Can Trump win in 2024?
Mr. Reagan.
A couple of weeks ago, I was cajoled into going to CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference. I didn't want to go this year, but let me tell you, I am very happy that I did. And I have to thank my good friend Sebastian Gorka for encouraging me to go and for his incredible generosity while I was there. America First is the best political show in existence, and if you haven't been listening to it, you really should. Also, while I was there, I got some sweet swag. Anyway, one thing that I found incredibly fascinating about this trip is that it dispelled a myth that's been circulating lately, one that I have maybe helped perpetuate myself. The myth that the Trump movement is dead, and that DeSantis is the new champion of conservatives in America. After CPAC, I have no questions at all about who's going to be the next Republican candidate for president. It is going to be Donald Trump. And I'll explain why I think that in one moment. First, I have to sell you something. Everybody has to invest in gold. I think that is obvious by now. Noble Gold Investments have made it their mission to stay on top of the most important economic news. 3 bank runs in less than a week. Now, these are the second largest and third largest runs in history. The government is taking steps to guarantee all deposits. That means more money printing. Plus, the Fed is sitting on unrealized losses of about $1.2 trillion on their $8.3 trillion bond portfolio. And the Fed will continue to raise interest rates even if they tank the economy. Do you know who the only people are out there right now who are not afraid? The ones who invested in gold with Noble Gold Investments. Gold is the most stable asset outside of any government control. Thousands have approached Noble Gold Investments to get their hands on gold. Hurry and go to noblegoldinvestments.com to secure your wealth now and get a free 5-ounce America the Beautiful coin with each gold or silver IRA if you qualify. noblegoldinvestments.com, that's noblegoldinvestments.com. Now, I have been to CPAC every year since 2019, and this year was a bit smaller than usual. It's not an election year, and so that's typical. But let me tell you, CPAC this year was the best CPAC I've ever been to. I chatted with Carrie Lake, I chatted with Jack Posobiec, I introduced my brother to Nigel Farage, and I finally got to meet Donald Trump himself. But I'll tell you that story in 1 second. First, let me say that the most surprising part of the trip was Donald Trump's speech. Trump speaks every year at CPAC, but this year was different. Everybody thinks DeSantis might take the nomination, so it was important to me to see what Trump was going to say, to see if he still had that magic from 2016. And let me just say, this was the best Trump speech I have ever seen. Trump said everything that needed to be said in the current political climate. Let's watch a few clips from the speech. I'm going to point out things that I think were particularly good.
We had a Republican Party that was ruled by freaks, neocons, globalists, open border zealots, and fools. But we are never going back to the party of Paul Ryan, Karl Rove, and Jeb Bush.
This point really made me sit up. I thought, whoa, I can't believe he's like mentioning Republicans by name. He's really calling out the deep state. He's calling out establishment Republicans. He's sort of declaring war here against rhinos and Democrats and anyone who would oppose improving quality of life in America, true conservative traditional values. He's calling out politicians who just want to make money off of their political position and their power. And this is something that not all Republicans will do. And this is something I think a lot of Americans want to hear. So for Trump to come out punching like this, very impressive, very powerful, and I think it's incredibly effective. Let's listen to some of his other awesome points.
Illegal immigrants come in, and we house them in the Waldorf Astoria and many other of the greatest hotels anywhere in the world. But our soldiers, we do nothing for them. They sleep out at night and they freeze. They freeze in the cold, and they die in the heat. Well, people that came into our country illegally are in beautiful hotel suites.
Now, Trump has always been big on helping American veterans, and he's always been against illegal immigration. And striking that contrast here, I think, works really, really well. It's a really effective point because they really are trying to put up illegal immigrants in hotels, which is a bizarre thing to want to do. And I think it's going to hit home with a lot of Americans.
We are never going to be a country ruled by entrenched political dynasties in both parties, rotten special interests, China-loving politicians, of which there are many. You listening to this, Mitch McConnell? Are you listening?
Whoa. He just calls out Mitch McConnell, right? This is just brutal, but honest. He's being honest. And I think if he's able to produce this kind of an effect in his speeches moving forward, I know a lot of people didn't see the CPAC speech, but if he's able to produce speeches like this moving forward, he's going to get the nomination, no question.
We banned transgender insanity from our military.
I love that he says, we banned transgender insanity from our military. He doesn't say, that, this is a problem. He doesn't hedge. He doesn't say like, oh, this is why transgenderism could potentially be a problem in our military. He doesn't explain anything. He just says transgender insanity. That, I mean, I honestly don't know any politician, current politician or past politician, that would have the testicular fortitude, as my friend Sebastian Gorka likes to say, to just call out transgenderism as insanity. But that's exactly what it is. And the American people want to hear stuff like that. They need to hear the truth, told as brutally as necessary. And talking about transgenderism as insanity, I think the brutality of that expression is necessary to hit the point home that transgenderism is a kind of insanity. And what the leftist is talking about, trying to normalize that, is in itself insane. So it's just a beautiful point that he made in this speech.
Now I am experienced, and I know the people of Washington. I didn't know them. I was from New York, but I now know the good ones, the bad ones, the weak ones, the strong ones. I know them all. I know the people that have to do the job and can do the job. A lot of them are in this room right now.
This is probably my favorite point that he makes in the entire speech. It's very critical because a lot of people criticize Trump for not completely draining the swamp, not firing everybody that needed to be fired, allowing Fauci to continue in his position, for instance. But the problem was that Trump had no way of knowing who was loyal to him, who was a strong American patriot who was willing to do what needed to be done to improve the quality of life of everyday Americans, and who was there to try to undermine him. He didn't know that, right? He needed the full 4 years to uncover these people, to expose these people. And actually, it might be a good thing that Joe Biden got in there for a couple of years here, because Trump's in there for 4 years, and then you see the people who were willing to then speak out against Trump after he was out of office. Now Trump knows exactly who needs to be kicked out of government when he gets in again. DeSantis won't fully understand that, nor will any other candidate for president for the Republicans moving forward. Trump's the only one that knows fully who needs to be in there and who needs to get out, right? Because he's dealt with it. He's been there for 4 years. And for him to say that here, if he can continue to make this point as he presents speeches, to say, I know who needs to go, right? I've been there. I've met these people. I've shaken their hands. I know who the scumballs are. Not everybody does. So I can drain the swamp much more effectively than anyone else. And I think it was beautifully expressed here. And I think that he can continue to make this point strongly. And I think it's a compelling one. I think it's incredibly convincing. Sure, he wasn't able to do that the first time, but he wasn't given the full chance. He wasn't given the full 8 years. Now he's got another 4 years to do it, and I think it can be done. What I think needs to be the number one priority for anybody who gets into office moving forward is getting rid of the corruption in Washington, D.C. To me, that is the most critical thing, because we cannot continue to function as a nation. We're going to keep spiraling down the drain if we do not clean out the corruption that has infected Washington, D.C.
From the beginning, we have been attacked by a sick and sinister opposition, the radical left, communists, the bureaucrats, the fake news media, the big money special interests, the corrupt Democrat prosecutors. Oh, they're after me for so many things. Oh, those prosecutors. Some are racists. Some hate our country. They all hate me. They'll get me for anything, anything. You put a comma in this paragraph. Why did you do that? I don't really know. The partisan and often corrupt intelligence agencies, the George Soros money machine that spends a lot of money on the prosecutors, by the way. The Antifa thugs who are allowed to roam the streets while we have people that in many cases are great patriots, great patriots, saying prayers every night, playing our national anthem every day, and they're sitting in a jail nearby, rotting away, and being treated so unfairly, like nobody's probably ever been treated in this country before, except maybe me.
First, he lists a lot of the opposition, people that are opposing him, people that are opposing good governance and conservative ideas generally, Antifa and whatnot, but also the deep state and all that kind of stuff. He's listing it off very clearly, very accurately, and I think very effectively. And then he goes on to say, look at how unfair it is that you have all these people who were violent extremists, and they were never punished for their protests, for their criminality, their vandalism. But then you've got all these genuinely peaceful protesters from January 6th rotting in prison unfairly. I mean, that pisses a lot of people off. It certainly pisses me off, right? And for him to point that out, I think very good point. I think a lot of people are going to appreciate that.
Our enemies are lunatics and maniacs. They cannot stand that they do not own me. I don't need them. I don't need anything about them. I don't need their money. They cannot steer me. They cannot shake me, and they will never, ever control me, and they will never, ever, therefore, control you. At the end of the day, anyone else will be intimidated, bought off, blackmailed, or ripped to shreds. I alone will never retreat.
This is an incredibly important point. I'm really glad that he pointed this out, because this is something that I don't think most people have thought about since 2016, which is that a lot of politicians, even conservative politicians, can potentially be seduced by bribes, and they can potentially be manipulated through blackmail, right? They can be coerced. Trump can't really be coerced. He's got too much money. You can't bribe him. He's been clean since the 1980s because he's been so famous that he's known he's got to keep his business clean and he's got to keep his personal life as clean as he possibly can, so to stay out of the negative press, right? To avoid hit pieces. And that's been true even before he was running for president, because he was super famous, since the 1980s. So he's understood that. And so it's been very difficult for the left to try to destroy him by trying to dig up dirt. And they can't bribe him, and this is why they hate him, right? He cannot be corrupted in the same way that some other candidates might be vulnerable to that. And I think that's going to be a major point that he's going to bring up time and time again. He was never able to be controlled by the deep state during his previous administration, and he won't be able to be controlled in the next administration. And I think that's so critical. And that actually, from the very beginning, even when I wasn't sure how conservative Donald Trump was when he was running in 2016, I always appreciated that he couldn't be bought. I absolutely loved that. I also appreciated that he was a businessman, and running the federal government is very similar, I think, to running a massive corporation like he's been able to do, which is another point that I think he should probably bring up, but I don't think he will. But the point that he can't be bought, I love that.
I will totally obliterate the deep state. I will fire
I love that he calls out the deep state bluntly, right? He says, I'm going to get rid of the deep state. Now, this is something that so many conservatives really want, right? It's the very similar point to the previous point, where he's going to dig out the cancer that is the corruption in Washington, D.C. But here he says it much more bluntly. I'm going to get rid of the deep state. And like I said before, this is my number one issue. This is the thing that I think is more important than anything else. We need to remove the corruption out of Washington, D.C. And why does he get such a massive applause here? It's because he says it bluntly.
The one we want to run against is Trump. Do you ever hear that? Oh, we want to run against Trump. Even though I'm leading every one of these guys, and even though I won the second election, okay, I won it by a lot. But they say, we want to run against Trump. In the meantime, they're spending hundreds of millions of dollars trying to find just a single word, a sentence, anything, to prosecute Trump, because they don't want to run against me. That's what they say. We want to run against Trump. We'll do anything to run against Trump. They have the greatest line of bullshit of any group of people.
I love that. I love that he's calling out their obvious lie. We want to run against Trump. We want to run against Trump. And he's like, and then they're spending millions of dollars to try to prosecute me so that they don't have to run against me, right? And it's so true. It's such a beautiful... I love how Trump talks sometimes. I mean, people don't like him because he's too blunt. People don't like him because he's a little bit rude or whatever. But oftentimes he does see things in a way that other people don't see them, and he's able to expose certain things that most people aren't able to even notice. They don't even notice, right? But it's such a good point. If you want to run against Trump so much, why do you keep prosecuting him and trying to use all these dirty tricks to keep him from running again? Obviously, you do not want to run against Donald Trump. That's just a lie. But Democrats lie about everything, so not too surprising.
I was the only president in decades that didn't have a war, but I completed wars that were already started, including defeating 100% of the ISIS caliphate. 100%. I was also the only president where Russia didn't take over a country during my term. Russia took over not because I got along with Vladimir Putin very well. I say, Vladimir, don't do it. You and I are friends. Don't take over any countries because, Moscow will be hit very hard. I told him things.
This is a really good point. Trump has made this point many times that he will very easily end the war between Russia and Ukraine. Now, a lot of people are going to say, oh, that's BS, you can't do that, whatever. But Trump claimed a lot of things before he was elected in 2016, and he accomplished the vast majority of them. A lot of them were things that people said could never be done, and yet Trump did it. Trump has a history of doing this, of saying things that a lot of people think sound ridiculous or stupid, but then it turns out Trump's right. Trump can follow through with his promises. Trump promises something, he can make that happen. And so if Trump says that he can end the war in a day between Russia and Ukraine, I actually believe him. And I love it when he says bombastic things like this. I just think it's fantastic. And I do think that there's a lot of Americans like me who go, you know what? If anyone can do it, it's Donald Trump.
On day one, I will revoke Joe Biden's crazy executive order installing Marx's diversity, equity, and inclusion czars in every federal agency. And I will immediately terminate all staffers hired to implement this horrible agenda.
It's a small point, but I think it's an absolutely critical one, right? This diversity, equity, and inclusion nonsense that the Biden administration promotes, we all hate it. Every conservative hates it. So for Trump to point that out, it's an easy win, but it's something that needs to be said, and it's going to win over a lot of people, including myself. I'd love to hear him say that.
I will revoke every Biden policy promoting the chemical castration and sexual mutilation of our youth, and ask Congress to send me a bill prohibiting child sexual mutilation in all 50 states.
Love it. Love it. I mean, everybody is on their feet, right? Prohibiting the mutilation of children, right? I mean, it's a no-brainer. Nobody would oppose this, right? But Democrats seem to. We've gotten to this crazy point in our society where genital mutilation of children is deemed acceptable. Not just acceptable, but promoted by Democrats. So for Trump to take a stand against this, I mean, it's a winning point. I mean, the whole crowd went crazy when he said this, as well they should have. And it's sad that we actually have to make statements like this or make laws like this, but we clearly do. And for Trump to point that out, very important.
I will destroy the illegal censorship regime and bring back free speech in America, because we do not have free speech.
Okay, this is a very quick point that he makes, sort of buries it in the speech, but I think this is critical. Bring back free speech in America. I mean, my YouTube channel is utterly suppressed because what? Because YouTube disagrees with my political views? We do need to fix this situation so that political speech does not get intentionally suppressed by these social media companies.
And I will move heaven and earth to fully and finally secure our elections. All Republican governors should immediately go for paper ballots, one-day voting, and voter ID.
This is so critical. Again, a simple point, but an incredibly important point. He's going to try to fix our election process so that you remove any kind of corruption. The problem with the 2020 election, the problem with the election in 2022, the midterms, is that a lot of people suspected corruption, but you couldn't prove all of it. Whatever it is that was done that people felt was a bit shady, they couldn't put their finger on it. There were great theories. There was some evidence, like Dinesh D'Souza's 2000 Mules film, stuff like that. There are a lot of people out there that are confident that they know exactly how, elections are manipulated. I've looked into this a lot. I'm not 100% sure yet. So instead of going after specific problems, specific kinds of fraud, what you got to do is do something like paper ballots, do something like eliminate this mail-in voting stuff, a lot of the stuff that facilitated potential fraud. And so when he says this, the crowd, of course, goes nuts. We love to hear it. We want actually fair elections in America. Absolutely critical.
And until we can eliminate ballot harvesting, we will become masters at ballot harvesting. We have no choice. Beating the Democrats at their own game.
Now, I love this point. This didn't get an eruption of applause, but here's the thing. I don't think a lot of people have heard this idea that we keep saying that you need to vote on the same day, on election day. Forget mail-in voting. Forget voting early. You need to vote on election day. Well, Scott Presler came out recently and he said, no, you know what? You do need to vote early. The Democrats are doing it. We need to do it. And we've been against ballot harvesting. We said, look, ballot harvesting facilitates fraud. So Scott Presler said, okay, forget saying we need to eliminate ballot harvesting. That's not going to happen everywhere. Hopefully we can eliminate ballot harvesting eventually, but until then, we need to do it ourselves. And I just thought this was brilliant. I had him on the show a few weeks back, and he made this. It was a brilliant case. If you don't follow Scott Presler on Twitter, I highly recommend it. Anyway, Trump is making the same exact point here. And I actually texted Scott after I heard this, after I watched this speech, and I said, hey, did you watch Donald Trump's speech? And he said, yeah, he's like, I love it. And I said, because he had met Donald Trump the same day. And I said, did you mention the ballot harvesting thing to him? And he said, no, that he hadn't, but he assumes that somehow maybe this idea got to Trump from him originally. And I don't know how true that is. I hope it is, because I know Scott and I think he's a great guy. But the point is that, yes, we do need to do ballot harvesting ourselves to stop Democrats from doing it. We don't trust Democrats, but we trust Republicans to go in and do the ballot harvesting and not to cheat. And so we need to have a massive ballot harvesting operation ourselves. And I love that Donald Trump said this.
As I announced yesterday, we will hold a competition to build new freedom cities on the frontier to give countless Americans a new shot at home ownership and the American dream. It's such a wonderful, beautiful thing.
This is a really weird idea. I've never heard any politician present the idea of building new cities. And I actually kind of love this. When I was 16, 17, I wrote my first screenplay. And part of that screenplay, the idea was that America had gone so far left-wing that conservatives had to build their own towns, essentially, throughout America, in the frontier, like you said, in places that there weren't a lot of people. They built these towns specifically for conservatives. They wanted to keep these towns morally right, virtuous. They believed in traditional Western values. And it's bizarre. It was almost like prescient, right? Because that's what Donald Trump is proposing that we do here. We build these cities that, Americans who maybe don't want to live in these like left-wing hellholes, they could move to, and they can build up a city with conservatives, hopefully. Can that happen? I don't know, but I love the idea. I love the ambition.
And I'll challenge the governors of all 50 states to join me in a great beautification campaign. We will rename our schools and boulevards, not after communists, but after great American patriots.
I love that too. They keep tearing down statues. They keep trying to rename everything for civil rights leaders and all this kind of nonsense. Marxists, as Donald Trump says. Yeah, we need to rename our streets after truly great Americans.
We will make America proud again. We will make America safe again, not like our streets of the cities, which are a disgrace for the entire world to watch. And we will make America great again. Thank you very much. CPAC, thank you. Thank you very much, guys.
Fantastic. Fantastic. The speech was perfect. At the end of it, Gorka just looked over at me and he said, let's see DeSantis beat that. We all knew, watching that speech, that Donald Trump was back. My mother has actually started to lean away from Trump recently. She thought that maybe somebody new, somebody younger, somebody different, that's who she thought maybe we needed. But I spoke on the phone with her after I got back from CPAC, and she told me that she had watched Donald Trump's speech, this speech, and she told me, Trump won me back. It was a great thing to hear. You know what, guys? Trump has still got it. Now, after the speech was over, just moments after the end, what you just watched there, my brother, Sebastian Gorka, and I, we went to leave. But Gorka took us out the back way, past the CPAC security, past the Secret Service agents, and he took us to meet Donald Trump. I shook the man's hand, and he pointed to Gorka, and he said, "This is the best guy right here. This guy, he is the best guy." And then the two spoke for a moment, and it was fantastic. It was great to see Donald Trump in person. We didn't get a photo or anything like that, but my brother did record a short video of Donald Trump signing something afterwards. And it was a strange experience because he was far more genteel than I had expected. He was like an old-fashioned gentleman from a bygone era. He had a fatherly quality to him. Everything about Donald Trump was more elegant and more serene than anything that you will see on TV or on a big stage. There is something about shaking a man's hand, looking him in the eye, and getting a sense of who he really is that it's just a far different experience from watching the man on television. Trump is just a lot different in person. Now, afterwards, I turned to my brother and I said, "John, think about it. We didn't just meet Donald Trump tonight. We met one of the greatest presidents in the history of the Republic. And that is a heck of a thing." And I think we forget that sometimes. We forget how great a president that Donald Trump was. But if he keeps making speeches like that one, I think we'll all remember again real soon. The DC elite are afraid of Donald Trump, and that is exactly why we need to all get behind him. The other day, George Soros made a statement predicting that DeSantis would take Trump out.
DeSantis is shrewd, ruthless, and ambitious. He is likely to be a Republican candidate. This could induce Trump, whose narcissism has turned into a disease, to run as a third-party candidate. That would lead to a Democratic landslide and force the Republican Party to reform itself. But perhaps I may be just a little bit biased.
The establishment deep state swamp dweller Jeb Bush also spoke very highly of DeSantis.
Is this Ron DeSantis' opportunity to run for higher office?
I think it is. He's been a really effective governor. He's young. I think we're on the verge of a generational change in our politics. I kind of hope so. I think it's time for a more forward-leaning, future-oriented conversation in our politics as well. And who better to do it than someone who's been outside of Washington, who's governed effectively, who I think has shown that Florida could be a model for the future of our country.
And this kind of scares me. I've never had a problem with Ron DeSantis' policies, and in fact, I've always appreciated his willingness to go against the woke mob and the left generally. But when folks like George Soros and the Bushes seem to want DeSantis to win, it's concerning. People say that Trump is too toxic, he's too divisive, the left hates him too much, he can't win. To people who think this, let me ask you, do you really think they're not going to go after DeSantis with exactly the same level of vitriol that they went after Trump? Of course they will. Not because DeSantis is as big of a threat, but because they now know that it works. They know that this kind of vicious attack, no matter how unfounded, will convince gullible Democrat voters. Now, some conservatives, they dislike Trump because he refuses to disavow the vaccines. He refuses to say that the vaccines were bad. And Trump's in a tough position here because, you see, Donald Trump will never denounce the vaccines because he initiated the Project Warp Speed. He was the one who facilitated the development and distribution of these drugs, and he wants credit for it. And this is why a lot of people want to vote for DeSantis. They just can't forgive Donald Trump for those vaccines. But I think a good compromise could be had. Donald Trump could regain a lot of goodwill just by saying, look, the vaccines should never have been required for employment. They should never have been required for the military. They should never have been recommended for children or young people or healthy people. That was never my intention. And the Democrats who exploited the pandemic in order to control you, to require you to take these drugs, that is shameful and evil. If he said something like that, I think a lot of Americans would love Donald Trump again. Or maybe he needs to just drop the topic and not bring it up, just like he did with the CPAC speech. What do you guys think? Did you see the CPAC speech? Is Trump winning you back? Are you still 100% behind our once and future president? Let me know in the comments below. And remember, it's not that our liberal friends are ignorant. It's just they know so much that is not so. Good night.
What is fascism? Fascism is private ownership, private enterprise, but total government control and regulation. Well, isn't this the liberal philosophy? The conservative, so-called, is the one that says less government. Get off my back, get out of my pocket, and let me have more control of my own destiny.